Welcome to part 17 of the Philosophy of the Ananke by Lance Gordon, which is me. And we are into an update with Herbert Spencer, who saw the same phenomenon in the 1800s and was compelled to write a 10-volume synthetic philosophy based upon the First Principles book that he wrote first, and that First Principles is essentially the Ananke in disguise. Without the metaphysical part, which he addresses in his first 9 chapters as being impossible to deal with. So unfortunately, we can't even get his conjecture as to the metaphysical aspects of his First Principles. Really unfortunate. I would have liked to have known what he thought, with the caveat saying it's just not as valid as the rest. In any case, we're up to the law of evolution, which I'll continue the reading. The law of evolution, which essentially is going from, let me get this right, chaos to stillness in the Ananke terminology. Herbert Spencer believed that simple evolution, chaos to stillness, acted upon the largest aggregate, our universe, at first, and then compounded itself as the larger motion unfolded. Gradually, secondary evolutions started appearing, thus forming sub-aggregates in time. As mentioned in chapter 13 of his book, quote, primary redistribution ends in forming aggregates which are simple where it is rapid, but which become compound in proportion to as its slowness occurs, allows the effects of secondary redistributions to accumulate. Let me say that again, it was pretty sloppy. Primary redistribution ends in forming aggregates, large clumps of things that are coordinated, which are simple where it is rapid to get there to forming the aggregates, but which become compound in proportion as its slowness allows the effects of the secondary redistributions to accumulate. Page 278 of his book. Spencer felt strongly that his claim of a law of evolution in all things had to be supported by evidence coming from the macro world through the micro. Quote, tracing, so far as we may by observation and inference, the objects dealt with by the astronomer and the geologist, as well as those which biology, psychology, and sociology treat of, we have to consider what direct proof, more precisely evidence, there is that the cosmos in general and in detail conforms to this law, namely the law of evolution, as he expressed it, which is different somewhat to Darwin. They were contemporaries, incidentally, Herbert Spencer and Darwin, and just as a point of reference, it was Herbert Spencer that coined the expression survival of the fittest, not Darwin. So give credit where credit is due, just to let you know. Anyway, continuing my comment. Therefore, for the next few pages or so, I will share with you some of his evidence in his own words. Chapter 14 is devoted to the details which support his contention. Excerpts from 20 pages of his evidence follows. This is from his book, quote, our sidereal system, by its general form, by its clusters of stars of various degrees of closeness, and by its nebula in all stages of condensation, give grounds for suspecting that generally and locally concentration is going on. Evolution, under its primary aspect, is illustrated most simply and clearly by this passage of the solar system, from a diffused, incoherent state to a consolidated, coherent state. While, according to the nebular hypothesis, there has been going on a gradual concentration of the solar system as an aggregate, there has been a simultaneous concentration of each partially independent member. The changes of every planet in passing through its stages of nebulous ring, gaseous spheroid, liquid spheroid, and spheroid externally solidified, have an essentials dissipation of motion and aggregation of matter paralleled the changes gone through by the general mass, and those of every satellite have done the like. Page 281. He goes on to say that these concentrations are in turn integrated among themselves in a stronger way than they had originally existed, i.e. solar systems emerge, not just planets, not just moons, etc. Let us continue. Quote, to astronomical evolution we pass without break to the evolution which, for convenience, we separate as geologic. The history of the Earth, as traced out from the structure of its crust, carries us back to that molten state which the nebula hypothesis implies. And as before pointed out, the changes called igneous are accompaniments of the advancing consolidation of the Earth's substance and loss of its contained motion, page 282. Unfolded organic impacts are next investigated. Quote, every plant grows by taking into itself elements that were before diffused, and every animal grows by reconcentrating these elements previously dispersed in surrounding plants or other animals. And when, after fertilization, a more active evolution commences, its most conspicuous trait is the drawing in to the germinal center of the substance which the ovum contains, page 284. The compounded evolution of the secondary effects is exemplified in certain biological instances as well. Quote, in the mammalian embryo heart, at first a long pulsating blood vessel, by and by twists upon itself and integrates. The bile cells constituting the rudimentary liver do not simply become different from the wall of the intestines. Let me say that again. The bile cells constituting the rudimentary liver do not simply become different from the wall of the intestine in which they first lie, but while accumulating, they diverge from it and consolidate into an organ. Kindred changes go on after birth and continue even up to old age. My comment. Evolution, integration, is explored further, leading to sociological analogies that may be actual manifestations in disguise. Quote, integration is displayed not within the limits of an individual only, but by the union of many individuals. The Salpida are composite creatures having the shape of chains joined more or less permanently, and Pyrosoma shows us a large number united into a cylinder. Moreover, in the Botryllidae, the merging of the individualities goes so far that instead of having separate skins, they are enclosed within a common skin. From this kind of integration, we pass to a kind in which the individuals are not physically united but simply associated, are integrated only by their mutual dependence. Creatures that hunt in packs, or that have sentinels, or that are governed by leaders, form bodies partially united by cooperation. Among polygamous mammals and birds, this mutual dependence is closer, and the social insects show us still more consolidated assemblages, some of them having their members so united that they cannot live independently. Page 288. In the social organism, integrated changes are abundantly exemplified. Uncivilized societies display them when wandering families such as those of the Bushmen join into tribes of considerable size. A further progress in mass results from the subjugation of weak tribes by stronger ones, and in the subordination of their respective chiefs to the conquering chief. Such combinations which, among aboriginal races, are continually being formed, evolution, and continually broken up, dissolution, become among superior races relatively permanent. It certainly takes a longer time to get to dissolution at the very least. My interpretation from Spencer and the knowledge of the Ananke is that in time our world society reaches increased stability through these aggregations, nations in our case, and the unnecessary motion of destruction is lessened proportionally so that an increased integrated mass, a world population, and an interdependent arrangement is achieved. Quote from Spencer, though evolutions of the various products of social activities cannot be said directly to exemplify the integration of matter and dissipation of motion, yet they exemplify it indirectly. Spencer continues with his law of evolution to the extent of even demonstrating its manifestation in linguistics, music, and ideas. Quote, among uncivilized races, the many syllabled names of not uncommon objects, i.e. common ones, as well as the descriptive character of proper names, show that the words used for the less familiar things are formed by uniting the words used for the more familiar things. Ashakish, pawnee for hand, shakuruisharet, which is day, that the great length of these familiar words implies low development, and that in the formation of higher languages out of lower, there is a gradual integration which reduces the polysyllables to disyllables and monosyllables. It is an inference confirmed by the history of our own language. Sterora has been in course of time consolidated into the English star, Mona into moon, Nama into name, Sunu into sun, God be with you into goodbye. In music, progressive integration is displayed in more numerous ways. The simple cadence embracing but a few notes, which in the chants of savages is monotonously repeated, becomes among civilized races a long series of different musical phrases combined into one whole. And so complete is the integration that the melody cannot be broken off in the middle, nor shorn of its final note, without giving us a painful sense of incompleteness. This is in page 298 of his First Principles. My comment. As far as ideas, he stated, quote, a still more decided integration has been of late taking place between the once sub-sciences of electricity, magnetism, and light. These ideas were combined into one unified concept during the 1900s. Example upon example, in all areas of life, he supplies the evidence of evolution, integration, relative chaos to relative stillness of the particular aggregate under scrutiny. Quote, evolution, then, under its primary aspect, is a change from a less coherent form to a more coherent form, consequent on the dissipation of motion and integration of matter. This is the universal process through which sensible existences, individually and as a whole, pass during the ascending halves of their histories. Herbert Spencer did a brilliant job at conveying the sense, the feeling, and the thought of not only if, but how the universe has transmitted the basic Ananke rhythm from the universe's macro effects down to the micro ones, from the astronomical Big Bang to the necessity for people to integrate and unify into an interdependent, cohesive whole, to the micro vibrations of electrons, protons, and neutrons, we get the sense of a singular design, which, with the help of logical necessity, unfolds. The evidence is overwhelming. This Ananke, this in-common design, this singular order to things, can manifest itself from the macro to the micro into all the various divisions of nature. And it can manifest itself from the macro to the micro into all the various divisions of nature and man, and yet retain a common theme. Should we view this possible linkage among all things as mere folly, mere chance, merely yet another quote-unquote school of thought? I'm afraid one can take the argument just so far. In the end, this judgment must be made by each one of us alone, based on our feelings, logical thoughts, and personal inclinations. Let me check the time that we're doing. Only 14 minutes. Okay. The limits of evolution. In chapter 22, Herbert Spencer states, quote, towards what do these changes tend, referring to evolution? Will they go on forever? Or will there be an end to them? Can things increase in heterogeneity through all future time? Or must there be a degree which the differentiation and integration of matter and motion cannot pass? His observations that are supported by his usual tenacious evidence points to, quote, in all cases, then, there is a progress toward equilibrium. that universal coexistence of antagonist forces which, as we before saw, necessitates the universality of rhythm, and which, as we before saw, necessitates the decomposition of every force into divergent forces, at the same time necessitates the ultimate establishment of a balance. Every motion, being motion under resistance, is continually suffering deductions, and these unceasing deductions finally result in the cessation of the motion. My comment. In other words, evolution, or the progression from chaos to stillness, in an Ananke sense, at first goes toward an equilibrium of sorts, then eventually a non-motion or stillness. Here is where Spencer and I differ a bit in our observations. I do agree, as he does, that evolution goes to a dynamic equilibrium, a moving equilibrii, as he describes it. But I only agree that this dynamic equilibrium vibrates in excessive modes, moderate modes, and deficient ones. At a cosmological extreme, it could be the case that we are left for a moment with unique clusters of dark matter, the maximum potential energy situation in our universe. However, this is likely to be a momentary extreme of deficient vibration, and in all likelihood still has the characteristics of some internal motion in order to form the universal ash. Even if we could imagine matter without electrons spinning and rotating around the nucleus, the condition would last an infinitely small amount of time until the mutual gravitation of all particles would begin to reverse translational motion toward the common center of our universe. This is the present view as of this writing and of the fate of our Big Bang. Let me comment that there are many other views from 1985 that really occurred, or even 2000. You have a possibility of an expanding universe that goes on forever, an increased expansion rate, which is a recent thing that is being debated, coming back on itself and sealing itself at the center. Again, we don't know. This is really tough to do. You can't extend the Ananke to see what a likely scenario is, and frankly, I do not think that the universe that expands then accelerates expansion is the most likely. It just doesn't make sense. In any case, fitting it with Ananke, or evolution dissolution for that matter. In any case, the dark and light matter seems to be sufficient in quantity to yield a reverse motion at some extremis. At least that was the thought in 1985, 1990. And if the universe as a whole oscillate or cease to exist only temporarily, not sure what I just read. Okay, let me try that again. Okay. And if the universe as a whole oscillates in a never-ending rhythm, then so must its components oscillate or cease to exist only temporarily. Okay, I said that better. Some of his remarks that support my dynamic equilibrium contention are as follows. Quote, we have instances of progressive equilibration, severally ending in the establishment of a complete moving equilibrium, after giving astronomical examples. Thus, all terrestrial changes are incidents in the course of cosmical equilibration, after giving geologic examples. Every living body exhibits in a fourfold form the process we are tracing out, after giving organic examples. The redistribution of matter can continue so long as there continues some motion unbalanced. These are pages 447 to 464 in his book, First Principles. Spencer points to the different modes of vibration, but does not explicitly recognize these modes as a sort of equilibrium. Quote, on occasions of intense joy or grief, each paroxysm, expressing itself in violent actions and loud sounds, presently reaches an extreme, whence the counteracting forces produce a return to a condition of moderate excitement, and the successive paroxysms finally diminishing in intensity, end in a mental equilibrium, and that is akin to stillness or comparative quiescence. In my opinion, he confuses the apparent static condition of stillness as an equilibrium state that can be achieved, but equilibrium is a state of non-change. Status quo, a semi-permanent condition or process at the very least. Since chaos to stillness is only half the history of things, even he believed that, then it should be apparent that dissolution, covered in the next section, must necessarily follow. Thus, chaos to stillness is followed by stillness to chaos. Therefore, stillness can never be a permanent or even semi-permanent condition as long as our universe is in a rhythmical motion. A rhythm, or more precisely, a set of rhythms, the normal moderate vibration of the Ananke, is the state of equilibrium that evolution and dissolution has as its ultimate limits. And even this state can change based on the environment in which it's formed. The normal moderate vibration can adapt to environmental changes. If change or motion comes to an end, then and only then will the normal moderate vibration cease to be the way, the first principle, the Tao, the Mayat, the Ananke. Page after page, Spencer demonstrates at the very least dynamic or moving, vibrating equilibrium. Once again, from the macro motion of our cosmos to the sociology of economic trade to the micro actions of our inorganic molecules, he belabors the point to exhaustion. I refer you to chapter 22 of his book for the details. Allow me to close this section of the comparative analysis with one of his conclusions. Quote, thus, from the persistence of force, namely the transformation of force and consequent energy, follow not only the various direct and indirect equilibrations going on around, together with that cosmical equilibration which brings evolution under all its forms to a close, but also those less manifest equilibrations shown in the readjustments of moving equilibria that have been distributed. By this ultimate principle is provable the tendency of every organism, disordered by some unusual influence, to return to a balanced state. Page 472. Okay, let me check the time. And we have time. The tendency toward uniqueness in Herbert Spencer's. Herbert Spencer goes even further in his evolution/dissolution analysis. A universal pattern that involves the type of dynamic equilibrium systems that are formed as a consequence of larger systems slowing down and evolving is revealed by him. It seems that not only are equilibrium subsets of the whole created and made dependent upon one another, but they are created with a uniqueness and specialization and individualness all their own. In aggregates that are inorganic, the subclusters of equilibrium systems are unique. One is never quite like another in form. In aggregates that are organic, they tend to be specialized in function as well. In life, they tend to be unique, specialized, and individualistic. This tendency towards creating uniqueness in the secondary effects never quite ends. Unique systems breed other unique systems, which in turn try to actualize even more uniqueness if possible. Thus, life, sub-aggregate equilibrium systems, tends to appear in the most unlikely organic and inorganic environmental niches. Some of the evidence for these uniqueness inductions are as follows. Quote by Herbert Spencer. We have nebula that are diffused and irregular, and others that are spiral, annular, spherical. The matter of our solar system during its integration has become more multiform, a gaseous spheroid, to unique planet, satellite systems, etc. The Earth was once a molten mass. Cooling by radiation must have separated the solids and liquids from the atmosphere, thereby producing uniqueness to include geographical distinctions. Excuse me. As a consequence of this ceaseless multiplication of differences, we now find that no considerable portion of the Earth's exposed surface is like any other portion, either in contour, in geologic structure, or in chemical composition. There has been simultaneously going on a gradual differentiation of climates. Quote, the history of every planet and every animal, while it is a history of increasing bulk, is also a history of simultaneously increasing differences among the parts. In plants, the albuminous and amylaceous matters, which form from the substance of the embryo, give origin here to a preponderance of chlorophyll, and there to a preponderance of cellulose, etc. Of the same general character are the transformations undergone by the fertilized ovum, which at first a cluster of similar cells quickly reaches a stage marked by dissimilarity of cells. By such modifications upon modifications, many and various arise the classes and subclasses of tissues, which intricately combine with one another and compose organs. Even the fossil record supports the contention that, quote, the more heterogeneous organisms, the more organically complex, have been evolved from the less heterogeneous ones. Our knowledge of past life upon the earth support the belief that there has been an evolution of the simple into the complex alike in individual forms and in the aggregate forms. From the evidence of multiform complexity in the inorganic and organic worlds, Spencer proceeds to deliver evidence with respect to the human condition. Quote, while the peopling of the earth has gone on, the human organism has grown more heterogeneous among the civilized divisions of the species, and the species as a whole has been made more heterogeneous by the multiplication of races and differentiation of them from one another. Page 312. He goes on. Society in its first and lowest stage is a homogeneous assemblage of individuals having like powers and like functions. Every man is a warrior, hunter, fisherman, toolmaker, builder, etc. Very early, however, we find an incipient differentiation between the governing and the governed. Along with conquests and the massing of tribes, the contrast between the governing and the governed grows more decided. In the course of ages, there arises, as among ourselves, a highly complex political organization of monarch, ministers, lords, and commons, with their subordinate administrative departments, courts of justice, revenue offices, etc. Meanwhile, there has been going on a differentiation of a more familiar kind, that, namely, by which the mass of the community has been segregated into distinct classes and orders of specialized workers. That exchange of commodities, which free trade promises so greatly to increase, will ultimately have the effect of specializing in a greater or lesser degree the industry of each people. Not only is the law thus exemplified in the evolution of the social organism, but it is exemplified in the evolution of all products of human thought and action, whether concrete or abstract, real or ideal. And he proceeds to cite example after example for no less than 14 more pages, starting on page 318. To summarize in his own words, quote, along with a passage from the incoherent to the coherent, referring to evolution, there goes on a passage from the uniform to the multiform. These parts are simultaneously becoming unlike in size, or in form, or in texture, or in composition, or in several or all of these. In other words, the universal cycle of things tends to breed equilibrium systems in the parts of the whole that in the limit are unlike, unique, specialized, and individualistic. And it looks like we're up to 29 minutes, so I will stop here and continue on. I guess this was part 17. We'll be continuing on part 18, continuing with Herbert Spencer and the like, and other updates. See you then.